It's strange, but I don't remember how the Breathing Shadow started creatively in the first place. I also don't remember how I dreamed up the concept of the Breathing Shadow. On the track sheet from the recordings, I recently discovered that the album title was The Breathing Shadow Symphony, pretty far into the sessions. I'm so happy I came to my senses and cut that last word. I have spent too much time recording and mixing music for others. I craved some alone time at the studio. But since the studio was my day job, there was no way I could spend more than a day down there to mess around without monetary compensation. So, did Black Mark ask me to do something for them? Or did I somehow convince them that letting me go bananas in my studio for a week would be an excellent release for them? I have no idea. Regardless of how it happened, I am so happy it did, because it was a magical time and it's quite unbelievable that I wrote, recorded and mixed this album in just a week. The first couple of days were insane, since my family was away while I was recording and there were no windows in Unisound's first location. I quickly lost touch with reality. At one point, I was so tired that I thought I saw the door handle turn down while putting on my shoes to go home. I got so scared that I stayed a bit longer. And when I finally had the guts to open the door, remember there were no windows in the studio, I saw no footsteps in the snow. After this incident that clearly blended my imagination and reality, I took it a bit easier and worked more sane shifts. It might have something to do with the amount of mold in that old cellar and also drinking only coffee and no water. I don't know. Nightingale was supposed to be a gothic rock project, an extension of the Sacrifice track from Edge of Sanity's The Spectral Sorrows. The problem was that my infatuation with goth was fading by the time I was actually writing the album. The whole deep voice, jangly guitars and a drum machine concept felt a bit limited. And what came out of this session was more of a gothic rock flavored hard rock with occasional flirts with progressive rock and metal. For some reason, I remember this scenario very clearly. Maybe because it was so unusual and untypical for me. It was the first day of the session. I was riding my bicycle to the studio as usual, and since I was pretty nervous about the whole thing, I decided to visit the alcohol shop, which is run by the Swedish state and called Systembolaget, on the way. It's perfectly cool to visit this shop after work on Fridays. However, it is super weird to be caught buying anything there on a Monday morning. I went in there anyway and bought a few cans of beer, probably Lappinkulta 5.2, since I figured they could help me get started and take the edge off the situation. The libations worked because before I knew it, I had written Nightfall Overture in what felt like 15 minutes, and suddenly I found myself in the drum booth banging out a heavy drum beat on my beloved Tama Superstar kit. But wait a minute. What about the Dr. Avalanche-inspired drum machine sounds I had planned to use for all the songs? The alcohol brought out the real me, and I had such a blast writing and recording this song in what felt like real time, no demo. What you hear on the album is first, maybe second takes. I knew I wanted to use a strange guitar tuning to avoid falling back on old familiar chord patterns. I remember that it was a very odd tuning that I used for an embryonic version of what later became the chorus for Gypsy Eyes. But if you listen to the guitars and the chorus of that song on the album, that still have that strange forgotten tuning, they sound like an amplified lawnmower. So I quickly realized that although it might have helped me to write that chorus some months earlier, it sure as hell wouldn't help me write 45 minutes of music in a week. So I started tuning the machine heads on the Yamaha RGX guitar I just had bought from my new friend Mikael Åkerfeldt, until I found a tuning that inspired me. It ended up being D-A-D-A-D-E, from low to high. And I just couldn't stop writing cool riffs and melodies on it, because now I had no idea which note would show up when I played. I still remember writing the first riff in Nightfall Overture and how it felt like a new world of tonality had opened up. After this first song was done, I remember thinking, this isn't very goth rock, is it? I quickly fired up the drum machine and set out to write the next Leave Me for Dead by Rosetta Stone. But sleep did not really set the world on fire, and I remember feeling a bit strange about the whole situation when it was done. It was goth rock 101, and nothing I could write another 8 tracks like to make it an album without drowning myself in the sink. So I decided to go with the vibe and create the best album I could. Sleep is not a bad song. In fact, one of my favorite moments on the whole album is when I sing "My frozen eyes refuse to see, la 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 la," and whatever. It gets me every time. I decided to stay with the drum machine for the next track and hopefully give it a bit of a goth that way. Not quite sure what to call the Dream Reader, speed goth? The first title for this one was Nightmares in Dreamland. It's definitely one of the album's highlights, and there are now 3 versions of this song. The original, the re-recording on Nightfall Overture, and my True Faith by New Order inspired Remix 2025 on CD 2 of this reissue. I think all versions are great, and it proves that a cool track can be interpreted in many different ways and still remain awesome. Higher Than the Sky is another deep cut that I had the pleasure of making a remix of for CD2 as well. I really dig the original version of it. The arpeggiated synth in the intro is inspired by the song Jane from John Wetton's Battle Lines album, which was the soundtrack to my breakfasts at home during this recording session. I had just bought it and I was very disappointed with it to begin with, but since I had invested in it, I decided to listen to it until I liked it. After a while, song after song, it started to fall into place, and now it's one of my Desert Island albums. For sure, it's really good. The verses are dark and brooding, while the choruses have a bit of a commercial edge, but are still on the darker side. Then there's the passage in the middle with only guitar and keyboards and spoken word with that Fish-era Marillion vibe, followed by a slow-dived inspired drum pattern and a solo inspired by Steve Rothery, of Marillion fame, of course. A while after the album was released, I saw that there was a Rage song called Higher Than the Sky. I was a bit surprised since I thought I had come up with a pretty unique title. In fact, I thought pretty hard about the song titles and avoided any title I knew was out there already, except for Alone. Yeah, but the question marks makes it a bit different than the Heart power ballad, which is excellent, by the way. Fast forward to Sweden Rock Festival 2002. I was watching Freak Kitchen being awesome on stage, and at one point I saw Peavy from Rage turning his head, and he looked in my direction. I was a bit starstruck because I was really into their Perfect Man album around the time it came out, and also some of their more recent stuff was really good and powerful, so I was a bit excited to have seen him there in the crowd. Then the weirdest thing happened. He turned around again and started walking towards me. Before I knew it, he stood right next to me, introduced himself, like he had to, and told me that he owned the skull on the Breathing Shadow album cover. This dude. I don't remember much from this conversation. Starstruckness, if that's a word, often induce acute memory loss. Fast forward a few more years in time, and sometime around 2006-2007, it became clear that Peavy's then girlfriend was a childhood friend of my wife Eva. I met Peavy a few times, and during one visit to his home, he told me how much he loved Nightingale and how he'd listened to the first album a lot in his car. Mind blown. It was one of these full circle moments where I had inspired someone who once inspired me. He actually confessed to stealing the Higher Than the Sky title from my record. I forgive him, of course. Later that evening, we were boozing pretty hard in the kitchen, and I think we started a project, like we musicians always do when the level of alcohol reaches a certain point. Until now, the closest we are to that project is me mixing and mastering 2 Rage albums, 1 Refuge album, and an album of re-recorded Avenger stuff. Peavy is an awesome dude, and his book, which features a photo of yours truly with the band, is an awesome read. And I hope it will get an English translation one day so all of you can read its excellentness. Next up is Recovery Opus. Going through the material Rico from Fermenting Innards sent, I found that this song was initially called Healing the Wounds of Confusion. When Rico recorded an album with me in 1995, I gave him the handwritten lyric originals and the track sheets from this album. He kept them safe for 30 years and scanned them for me to use in the CD booklet. Thanks a ton, Rico. You rule. This song is actually one of my favorites from The Breathing Shadow. It's only guitar and vocals. It was the track that I most looked forward to remixing, since a few notes in my vocal performance have bugged me over the years. And thanks to the genius of the computer program Melodyne, they could be nudged into place without any audible artifacts, and now it sounds like it always should have. The remix of this song is dedicated to Andreas from Another Life. Andreas always cheers me up with his spontaneous positive messages about my work with Nightingale and Unicorn. Tack! Next up is Return to Dreamland, an instrumental track that moves around through lots of sonic territories to match the various dream states of our main character. I recorded real bass guitar for all remixed track to get even more of that belief by the mission thing going. It's one of the songs, together with Night Comes Down from Judas Priest, that inspired this vibe from Nightingale, especially the Nightfall Overture song. The song starts with a musical sibling to the verse from Nightfall Overture, and then it takes a left turn towards doomy epic black metal, and then a right turn to a short burst of Iron Maiden worship, and then back to more evil harmonies again, complete with a big black metal revenge-drenched tom part, that after a short cowbell-based moment lead back to the major key, everything turned out good in the end type melody. Next up is Gypsy Eyes. The synthesizer intro is heavily inspired by the magical 70s punk rock group Balance song In for the Count, or something from the 3 first Gamma albums. After the obligatory guitar melody, we have the verse, which is very sparsely arranged, with only the kick up the bass patch from Peter Edvinsson's Corey Wave Station, and the Alessis D4 drums banging away in an as drum machine-like fashion as possible. As I mentioned earlier, it's the only thing that I had written before entering the studio for that week in 1995. I can recall writing the chorus down at the studio, including the grammatically questionable "totally drowned in gypsy eyes" phrase. I wrote and recorded a quick sketch of it that sadly is nowhere to be found. And just how long before I did the album this first musical seed was sown, I do not recall. I'm not sure if I was thinking, oh, it's a 3/30 hit single arrangement, or if I had run out of inspiration by this time, since the arrangement of Gypsy Eyes is very basic, and if I'm honest, I find the whole track a bit boring. When Andreas Axelsson and Benny Larsson from Edge of Sanity visited the Black Mark headquarters to bring home cool Edge of Sanity stuff, I also told them to bring home anything related to Nightingale or Moontower. And the guys brought home so much cool stuff I nearly passed out from excitement. One of the coolest things they found was a collection of all the paperwork surrounding The Breathing Shadow. And in one of the faxes I had sent early on, there was a track list, and it contained the suite ... We Meet Again, with the last 3 songs on the album as part 1, 2 and 3. How very prog rock. For some reason I decided to ditch the idea, and somewhere in this booklet is a scan of the original document. Then we have the oldest track that ever made it onto an album of mine. In 1979, my 2 older brothers Ingal and Dag and I had a band called Forge. Since our father had been driving Ford cars forever, the name probably came from there. The original of this song is called Tint gör ont, and the original lyrics deals with horrors of pinching or tint, as my brothers cruelly invented to torture me and my friends. My brothers would target mainly my arms, and they had different tints they do on me. All described by my brother in a video about this track on YouTube. So check out that video, and I'll promise you'll be looking over your shoulder the next time you take a nightly stroll. The fruktansvärt tint might be lurking nearby, waiting to take your arm off with his razor-sharp pinching claws. The original recording by Fords, with me on the orange Bontempi organ, Ingall rocking the green sparkle Klira bass, and Dag on autocrat drums and vocals, can be found on CD too. I am not exactly sure why I used the verse and chorus from this song on The Breathing Shadow, but it works well in the album context. The synth pad and the quarter note delay clean guitar have that Marillion misplaced childhood vibe that works as a backdrop for a super dry and in-your-face vocal. A funny anecdote from the recording of the vocals is that I accidentally sang the verse 1 octave lower than I had planned. Since I didn't talk much during the week and my voice always needed a bit of a warm-up before I could sing higher stuff. But for this one, I just got started. And the first word was so deep and fat that I almost fell off my chair while singing. Luckily, that first note was as deep as I could sing and still get some tonal content. If the song had been in a lower key, I'd have had to sing an octave up, and the vibe would have been a lot less ominous. Around the 2-minute mark, the Marillion worship really kicks in. One of my favorite Nightingale parts ever, with very inspired vocals and some interesting note choices. And then we're back into the full band version of the 6/8 groove of the Fords original, fleshed out a bit with the spoken word part that in all honesty hasn't aged that well. A bit of a cringe fest nowadays, but it felt cool at the time. The track ends with a beautiful piano piece, sadly performed on the very dated piano patch that I created myself in the Wave Station. I thought it sounded awesome back then, and definitely more realistic than the other alternatives available at the time, but now I wish it would have been done on the classic RD300S Piano 3 with chorus patch to give it that classic unicorn vibe. Well, you can't have everything. Next up is something of a rocker, originally called From the Other Side. It was thankfully changed to A Lesson in Evil, which is a cooler title, and of course a nod to the Exodus classic A Lesson in Violence. The verses have a bit of that message in a bottle thing going on, and I think I tweaked the D-A-D-A-D-E tuning a bit to be able to play the verse lick a bit cleaner. The bridge is super cool with its rather unorthodox and tritonus-like chord changes that work well with the deeper, more evil voice of the Shadow now making his vocal debut. The bridge is so awesome, and I wish the gospel-like piano and guitar break had never happened at the end of the solo. The bridge is so awesome, and I wish the gospel-like piano and guitar solo break never happened, and that the end of the solo part would have been a lot longer. But as many times before, hindsight is always 20/20, right? At 3:54, the Marillion vibe continues, and the "my friend" line in the lyric is of course a tribute to Assassin. Around the 5:30 mark, there's another spoken word part where the Shadow is laying down the law, and this bit was later used in Deep Inside of Nowhere as well. Last but not least, we have Eye for an Eye. Starting off with the Kevin Shields My Bloody Valentine inspired shoegazy drone. Oh fuck. Last but not least, we have Eye for an Eye. Starting off with a Kevin Shields My Bloody Valentine inspired shoegazy drone guitar for a bit, before the acoustic drums make their welcome comeback for the grand finale, accompanying the computer bass, the octave strings patch from the Wave Station, an unmistakable and very weird yet strangely fitting guitar tone here. The verse is amazing, with some chords that I probably never used before, giving it almost a 60s vibe and a tonality. The bridge and the chorus have that dreamy Pink Floyd vibe that fits perfect. And after the obligatory delay-drenched guitar melody, there it is, the Crimson riff. The riff that was too cool for only 30 seconds of airtime before disappearing into a short burst of Dream Theater-inspired lead guitar versus lead synth. I resurrected it a few months later to kick off the next Edge of Sanity album, yeah, and that's Crimson. And then we come to the very end, where the chorus Nightfall Overture makes a comeback before a loud, distorted scream ends the album after 53 minutes and 21 seconds. I have already mentioned the bonus material and remixes on CD2, but I figured I'd talk more about them. First of all, the master tapes from the recordings are long gone. I do, however, have one transfer I did back in 2006 of the first reel, and even if I still might have the MIDI from that reel on a floppy disk somewhere, since my friend Christian Moos is no longer with us, my chances of getting a synced up Fostex E16 plus Atari computer transfer again is as low as it can get. So I decided to go for another sound with the remixes. I recorded real bass for the tracks for the first time, since I would have to reprogram all the bass anyway. And the point of these remixes is to give the songs another vibe than the originals. One thing that always gets a lot better on these remixes is my vocals, since I have the ability to tune them a bit and create much bigger backing vocals. And that is usually by copying the backing vocals that have the same lyrics and just stack them on the first chorus, and then copy that chorus to all the other places in the song, creating multiple takes that I didn't have the ability to do back in 1995 to make it sound a little bit fatter and cool. I already mentioned the remix of Sleep, but I did not mention how much fun I had doing it, using mainly synths. To narrow the choices a bit, I could only use sounds from around the time I did the original, ending up with the classic Roland GX10P patched we used for Unicorn's Yellow and Greg, some Yamaha DX7 bells, a synth lead, and of course a drum loop from the ever-present Korg Wave Station. At first, I wanted to have a steady drum beat to function more as a metronome, and I found this loop thinking I would program the drums later on, with some variations and fills and stuff. But I got used to the loop, and I just kept it banging on through the whole track without any variation. Not sure that has ever happened on a track I released before. To make the Dream vocal a bit fatter, I cut out every time I sang that line and placed it at the first time it appeared in the song, ending up with somewhere between 50 and 75 takes that I later copied to all the other choruses. Yeah, there you go. The remix of Dream Reader had to radically differ from the original and the re-recording from 2005. After some consideration, I decided to do a piano-only version. I'm only using the fantastic 4-knob pop piano from Steinberg Sampletech. I know that I might have been able to make it sound more realistic and as if I played on a real grand, but I wanted it to have a bit of that 90s vibe, when piano also was used as a synth sound and had a bit of that static, obviously sampled thing going on. Next up is Higher Than the Sky, which got a full-on heavy metal treatment to make it work alongside my Moon Tower-ish cover version of Sisters of Mercy's Lucretia My Reflection. The middle section is no longer as ethereal as the original, now with drums and a full-on deep droning chug rhythm guitar during the guitar solo. Recovery opus is still pretty much the same, just added Leslie Cab and some extra reverb to the guitar, and the vocals sound a bit more epic and in tune. Hello and welcome back. I just took a short little break and made myself some magnesium, courtesy of Deserted Fear. Yeah, to quote Moxie, it's time to move on. Okay, where were we? Okay, let's go on here. Then we have the Tint gör ont track, 1 minute and 11 seconds of magic. Recorded in the autumn of 1979 in the room that at the time belonged to my brother Dog. Such a magical room where so many of my best songs have been written. When I was still a little kid, my brother Dog played Carry On Wayward Son to me in the car and proclaimed, "This is the best song in the world." I loved it too, still do. From that moment on, for a long time, whenever I sat down at the Östlinden Almqvist piano in Dog's room, I did it with the mindset to write a song better than Carry On, meaning the best song in the world. An easy feat for a little kid. So when Dog, many years later, said that the end section of Unicorn's Serena of a Million had Kerry Livgren class, yeah, Kerry wrote Carry On, it was a magical moment for me, since that part had been written on that piano in that room. Then we have the live stuff. Gypsy Eyes is not even a minute long since it's part of a medley, but it sounds really cool and deserves to be included. I think it was my friend Peter Edvinsson and Finspång's own Jeff Tate, also known as Micke Moberg's endless request for a lesson in evil, that finally made me cave in and prepare a live version of the whole song so they could rock out to it when we played at the Skogsröjet festival in Reissue, a 23-minute car ride away from where it was written and recorded. Eye for an Eye also works really well live, and with the full band treatment, it sounds like a song that could have been written much later in Nightingale's career. Now I need to have a coffee break, courtesy of Millencolin. Woo! Then there's the demos I made for the band to hear the live versions. I had totally forgotten about most of them and found them while searching the archives for other stuff. There's the demo for the medley we performed in Finland in 2010. I think all the medley sounds surprisingly good for something that wasn't meant for anyone else but the band members to hear. The last medley of the Breathing Shadow songs is extra cool because it was never performed at Prog Power. The instrumentation is also based on the setup when Dag still played the keyboards live, hence the guitar in the left and the synth in the right speaker panning. The short version of Alone is super cool and unique to this medley. In the end, we performed many of the songs from the Closing Chronicles instead and went for more of the prog than the power, and I think that was the right choice. There you have it, folks! The reissue of The Breathing Shadow and the liner notes. Read to you by yours truly. I hope you enjoyed it, and why don't you look in the next video, because there will be plenty more of those liner notes thingy-bingies. Have a nice day. Bye!